One special and very powerful command is cloning shapes. You can take any shape and repeat it as many times as you want by specifying a data set. Let me explain how this works by showing you an example. Let's say we have this data set where for each country we have sales of several products. Now what we want to do is to show the total sales of each of these products by country. So we would, for example, copy this here and copy this here and show, instead of the total sales, USA sales, Singapore sales, and so on. Now to do this, first things first, let's just do a little bit of formatting so that larger country names will fit. And note the shapes. We need to copy the text box twice, thrice, and the rectangle one thrice. That's because there are 3 countries, but we don't have to manually specify 3 times. It should be doing it from the data itself. So taking this data set, let's start defining the source of data. We have sales as a data set, which comes from the URL sales.xlsx. That's the file name here. And we'll start specifying the rules. So we really want to iterate over the data grouped by country. So we'll call it a new variable called country wise, which allows us to specify this expression. Sales, which is this previous variable, dot group by of country. This is using the pandas group by function. Now we want to take the first shape, which is the text box. Specifically, first rule is text box 2 should be cloned as a shape as many times as we have country wise data. So this will take each unique country and clone the shape that many times. Now we want to use the text coming from the country. The clone shape command creates a special variable called clone. This has a series of attributes. These are documented in clone shape. Clone.pos will be 0, 1, 2, etc. Clone.key will be, in this case, the country, which is what we are grouping by. And clone.val is the data set for that country. So it will contain a pandas data frame for these rows for the US. So we want the text to be clone.key, which is what we are grouping by. That's the country name. We also want to set the position. So let's set the left position. Actually, we'll add some space from the left. Let's say we use 3 inches times the clone position. Now, I'm not specifying that this is inches. That's because by default, the units are inches. You can change that by setting the unit to something else like centimeters. But by default, units are inches. Now let's see whether this works. I'll run SlideSense and this creates India, Singapore, and USA. Let's format it a bit. We also want to maybe add more to this. Let's say we'll say clone.key sales. So that will give us India sales, Singapore sales, and USA sales. And we can afford a little more space, so let's make it 4 inches. Does that work? Let's try it out. We'll run SlideSense again. And that gives us India sales, Singapore sales, USA sales with a bit more space. Let's do the next thing, which is the rectangle. It can be part of the same rule. We can clone this shape again, country wise. This allows us to put in the text as what we want. We want the cloned value, but sorry, clone.val, but we want the sum of its sales. So we need to define that as another data set. Let's call it sales. No, we already have a variable called sales, so we'll call it total sales. Now in each shape, we can define our own data. So here we'll say total sales is clone.val. Take the sales column and sum it up. So that should print the sales, but we want to format it with commas and no decimal places and potentially with a dollar at the end. We put double dollars because a single dollar is escaped. And let's say we put that at the beginning so we know what the value is. We'll also move these the same way as the text boxes so that they are aligned. Let's see if this works now. That didn't work. Let's explore why. Oh, the shape name is rectangle and it gave us a warning saying there is no shape called rectangle. It's actually rectangle 1. Let's try our luck. We still have the output presentation open. Let's close that. And that copies all of this and moves it. With this, we can create some very sophisticated shapes and patterns. All we need to do is decide where to place those and how many times we copy them, and of course what the styling of each one of these needs to be. A few things to remember. You can use a group by object like we did to group through items, but you can also use every row of a data frame. So if you had, let's say, one shape for each one of these items, each one of these transactions. Let's say we put in little circles indicating whether the sale has grown for it or not. Then you could just literally use the data frame. So you would have used clone shape as sales directly, the data frame itself, instead of country wise. You can also use a single series. So you can take a single column. For example, you may just take product or just sales and use that, or just a single row. These are pandas series and you can use those to replicate. Or you can literally specify the values. So you can say x comma y, or you can specify it as a dictionary, and it will, clone shape will loop through each one of these and create as many shapes as items that you have specified. I'll reiterate that clone shape is one of the most powerful commands that we have in the portfolio. The clone shape example is something that lets you create from a single template that has one row like this to a bar chart that has multiple rows, multiple images, multiple values, and so on, and even create dynamic animated presentations, making this one of the most powerful features in PPTXHandler and SlideSense.